Hello. Yes, I am speaking. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? I'm now going to talk. Okay, I cannot hear you.
Check, check. Can you hear me now?
I can, but I need to change where you're coming out of. Where's my audio settings? Speaker. Oh, I know what's happening.
Okay, simple on and off. Doesn't have much delay. Okay. All right, sounds good.
Excellent.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started in just a couple minutes. There's still folks in the halls waiting to go into their rooms, so just a couple more minutes. It is freezing. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on the very last session of the conference. We are excited that you chose to spend this hour and a half with us. So I first would like to introduce myself. My name is Quinn Parker. I am the CEO and founder of In Color, an organization focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion within the energy space. And I'm joined today by three incredible experts in our industry. I have Sabida, Dan, and Nicole, who's joining us from the phone. They are going to briefly introduce themselves and also share their thoughts on why diversity, equity, and inclusion is so important when discussing affordable housing. So I'll pass it first to Dan, and then we'll make our way around our room virtually too.
Good afternoon. I'm so glad to have been a part of this week. I want to just a shout out to Housing Oregon for putting this together, and a shout out to you guys for being here at the last session for 3 o'clock today. It's been chock full of a lot of learning opportunity. We hope you're able to experience that today as we go over a little bit about what we've been experiencing with some of this work around this. So my name is Dan Elliott. I'm the Senior Policy Advisor and Analyst for the Agency for Energy Services through our department, which involves energy assistance, low-income weatherization, the Oregon Multifamily Energy Program, among other programs involved with anything sustainable, green, and climate related right now, soon to come with the department. So I'm a little busy. For sure. And as things start to change, and especially with President Biden's call to action on a lot of fronts, we're going to be busy here in Oregon. And so we want to make sure that we're in the right position to be able to do that as a state and for our programs. And so that being said, this is one of those programs that does that. So in answer to that question, and why we're here today, one of the strategic aspects of our department was putting together a statewide housing plan. And one of the key strategies for that, I'm going to read this to you. And for those of you who can close your eyes, I just want you to take this in for what our obligation is for our strategy for our statewide housing plan from 2018 to 2023. We have until June to accomplish some aspects of this. So I'm going to read this to you. Our priority is equity and racial justice. So we are to advance equity and racial justice by identifying and addressing institutional and systemic barriers that have created and perpetuated patterns of disparity in housing and economic prosperity. The goal we have is that communities of color will experience increased access to OHCS resources and achieve greater parity in housing stability, self-sufficiency, and home ownership. OHCS will collaborate with its partners and stakeholders to create a shared understanding of racial equity and to overcome systemic injustices faced by communities of color in housing discrimination, access to housing, and economic prosperity. So that made the directors of programs, program managers like myself, we went, all right, here's our goal. How do we get there? How do we do that? How do we make that represent? And how do we manage the outcome to that? And so we began turning to all of our programs. particularly the Oregon Multifamily Energy Program. And so that's what you'll get a little taste of today in regards to how we're moving towards that. Our program, this program is the first program to move forward with this type of initiative and this kind of approach in the department. Thank you, Margaret Salazar, for giving a big thumbs up and a push for us in support with this. This was one of the last things she was able to go forth and make this happen. And so you're going to get to hear a little bit about that today. And that's on the why it's important for us, why it's important for me personally is we'll get into that a little later, but I'll pass this off.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sepide Rezania. I'm with Unru Solution, and my role in this program is I am the co-facilitator of the newly formed, lovely and exciting Oregon OR-MEP DEI Coalition. I'm co-facilitated with our moderator, Quinn Parker here. I think Dan talked about the mission for this for getting social and racial justice, I guess, amplified in this program, and I believe that in order to do that, we really need to move towards shifting the power to the people. And so in order to do that, it's really important to start integrating the voice of those people into our programs and eventually having those people actually create the programs and design the programs that are for them and not, other people creating it for them. So the first step towards that is really, I believe this is the first step where we start integrating and bringing the voices into the programs. And so that's really why I'm very excited about the integration of DEI into this program. And I guess the next person is Nicole on the screen.
Hello, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Awesome. Hi, I'm Nicole Robleski. I work with the Oregon Multifamily Energy Program in the capacity of the communication advisor and the diversity, equity, and inclusion lead within our program team. And I have, Zapita, you have the same answer for my reason why this is so important to me to integrate DEI and create this coalition for our program. I think we were about 2.5 years ago, we really started digging into understanding how little community engagement we had in the development and design and implementation of this program. And it became very obvious to us that we were taking a for us rather than with us kind of an approach. And the really, for me, the best way to get anything purposeful done and make real change and truly serve our customers and residents of Oregon is to engage them in the process, because those of us who are implementing aren't necessarily the ones making use of this program. And so we really wanted to make sure that we were engaging those voices, those perspectives, and having a real understanding palpably about what the tangible actions need to look like to make changes to our program to make it more accessible. Because we were looking at the reach that our program has and seeing that there were a lot of gaps even within the service territory that we support, and we wanted to figure out why. So yeah, that's why it's been really important to me. I'm really excited that we got this coalition launched this year, and I'm looking forward to what we're going to be able to accomplish together moving forward.
Thank you, Nicole. So in an effort to bring that collaborative approach to our session, we are encouraging you all to ask questions throughout the entire session, not just at the end. So as we go through our presentation, please feel free to raise your hand. I'll make sure to come down and bring the microphone to you. In addition to asking all of your questions, we do have coalition members in our audience as well as program team implementation folks. So they also will be adding additional context to the discussion this afternoon. So we do have a few slides, and Nicole, I think we want to go through some of those slides as giving you all some context of what our program is attempting to achieve. So can we go to the next slide, please? So I'm not sure, Nicole, would you like to take this slide, or would someone on the panel like to talk to this slide?
I was hoping Dan might be able to give this overview.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm just looking at it. I have trifocals. They
Gotcha.
try.
And this is basically just the background slide of
That's how that works. So
what our program is.
Thank you, Health Plan. So this is a little bit about our program. So the Multifamily Energy Program was created back in 2002. I'll give you a little history. When something called the public purpose charge, if you're a PGE customer or a Pacific Power customer, you'll see a little 3% fee that is the total that takes the total of your bill. Well, that goes into a larger pot. You've heard of the Energy Trust of Oregon. You've heard of all those incentives and rebates. Well, this is a portion that comes to us to do housing energy efficiency. And so the portion that comes to us, we develop the Multifamily Energy Program. We also have another low-income weatherization program through our state-funded, our federal-funded community action agencies. But this specific program is focused on multifamily units that are 5 or more. And we provide all sorts of incentives, the most robust and the most the strongest incentives in the state for multifamily work. And so we're really proud of that. We do many different functions of material and types of technologies that we put into these projects. And this is for projects that are 80% AMI, and half of the building units, 50% of the units need to be in that category as far as income. And we're really excited about that. It started, like I said, it started in 2002. It was a different animal. Unfortunately, during a pause in funding and program operations, we had collected quite a bit of revenue for the program. We revamped and redesigned the program about 2017. And in 2017, it has been the most successful weatherization program we've had in the state as far as output, number of units completed, the amount of impacts and energy savings. In fact, we have a waiting list that is quite considerable right now. We've had to put our program on pause because we ran out of money. And so that put me to work with legislators and with the governor's office, as well as others, to help put together a bill, House Bill 3141, that provided a 60% increase in this last session, actually in 2021, that increased our funding by 60% because of the success and because of the demand. And so it's a pretty healthy program now, and it will be, and we anticipate it's going to start up here very soon in November is what we anticipate. So with a lot more funding. So that's, in long and short of it, our multifamily energy program, and we've got plans for it because it gets to last until 2036.
Does anyone have any questions about the program or the overview that Dan just provided? Yes.
Hi, I'm Joy. I'm the new CEO for Transition Projects here in Portland. I think what I'm not clear about, which probably would be clearer throughout the presentation, is who's accessing this money? Is this an individual homeowner, or if this is a owner of a building? I'm not clear kind of what that looks like.
That's a great question. And it is the owner of a multifamily building. It can also be an affordable housing developer, whoever owns the building. Those are the folks that are accessing the funds right now. We have a lot of our funded projects go through our state's NOFA process, which is it's our funding mechanism by which we provide tax credits and other types of loans and grants that help subsidize the development of affordable housing. And this is part of that subsidy packaging that can be done, but that's who accesses it. NOFA is a Notice of Funding Allocation or Funding Award. Sorry, thank you. I'll put $1 in the acronym jar, sorry.
Any other questions on the program and the overview Dan just provided? Great. Can we go to the next slide, please? So we next want to talk about why we decided to form this DEI coalition and why we thought it was the right strategy to push forward the program's DEI objectives. And a really good way to start that conversation is to talk through some of the commitments that we made as a program to pushing forward diversity, equity, and inclusion. And Nicole, would you like to take this slide?
Yeah. So this is a really high level summary of our commitments, but they are to be actively anti-racist, to be as proactive as we can be, and take any advisement and direction. I think there's baked into that is also accountability. We are very interested in not just going with the flow, not being inadvertently complicit, but really putting anti-racism at the forefront of the lens that we're using as we move forward with this program in thinking through redesigns and implementation, the way that we communicate with stakeholders, the whole kind of bundle of the program. So that I think is kind of our overarching umbrella commitment. Next is to equitably serve the people of Oregon, especially the customers with the greatest need. And that is somewhat limited because we support customers who are specifically in Portland General Electric and Pacific Power territories. But within those spaces, we want to make sure that we're having a reach and that we are not putting the burden of communication on our potential customers, that we as a program take responsibility for making sure that folks in rural communities or who might have a language preference other than English, who are not, who don't use the same communication channels that we tend to market in, for example, that we are still going above and beyond to reach them. And that we're not just serving folks in the I-5 corridor who are kind of the low-hanging fruit, who know about our program already, but that we're making real efforts to find properties, including naturally occurring affordable housing. Acronym is NOAA for that one that you might hear come up. It's really looking to be as equitable as possible and seek out the folks who have the greatest need, the greatest energy burden, rather than simply saying, oh, we gave out money to people who fit the qualifications, we're done, we're successful. We instead really want to be digging deep to make sure that our program is having the most positive impact and attempting, and I guess, playing a role in leveling the playing field. Third is to disrupt systems that maintain inequality within the energy industry and beyond. This fits into the way that we're looking at our program design and working hand in hand with the DEI coalition to really dig into the policies and procedures that we have written into our program. We've been doing a lot of work over the past couple of months, just looking at the fine print and asking why. Why is this the way that it is? And instead of simply saying, oh, there's a policy that dictates that, we're saying, okay, why does that policy dictate that things need to go this way? They're causing unintended consequences or known harms, and we want to understand how we can change that and then go kind of pull those levers to disrupt those systems and see what change we can make rather than just accepting that it is what it is. And last but not least is really make purposeful change toward all of those ends. We are not interested in box checking. We really truly are doing everything we can to sort of roll up our proverbial sleeves. And, again, coming back to accountability and acknowledgement, seeing the role that each of us have played as individuals or within organizations, and finding real purposeful changes that we can make on a small or macro level to advance equity and racial justice within our program. Are there any questions about that piece?
Any questions on the commitments the program has made?
Thank you. So basically, the way I see it is, since I'm on trying to make sure that equity is everywhere, one of the things just to try to help this program is that, for example, person of minority, when I hear about energy efficiency, I feel it's for people higher more than I am. But these programs try to educate each and everybody of us that it's not, it can be reachable. It's just we need to educate more, we need to put more resources and try to level the playing field for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Kwame. Kwame is part of the DI Coalition, so he is an active participant in making these commitments a fundamental part of the way the program operates. Next slide, please. So I would like Sabina and Dan to talk a little bit about why you all thought, well, maybe Dan first and then Nicole perhaps, on why you thought the coalition was the right strategy to achieve the commitments you just heard Nicole share with you.
Oh boy, that's good. Well, don't adjust your lights, but I am a middle-aged white male, and I am in a position of authority, and I've been a bureaucrat for a long time, going on 30 years now. So I've been waiting for quite some time to be in a department that is taking the positions and taking the efforts and has the support from leadership to be able to move, to do the work that we need to do. One of the things that I did with the research to determine the energy burden in the state by race, we worked with Oregon State University to break that down into a map that helped us really figure out by census area what the energy burden was. That was very revealing to us. Bottom line is communities of color have a way higher energy burden than the white community does. So then, and you can see which ones it was, and not only that, you can see where, and we can see how many. We know where they are, we know what their burdens are, we know where this is. Now what? What do you do with that information, right? Great. As a policy person, as a program, great, we tell the legislature, we tell the governor, we tell everybody that, listen, they're like, great, we understand it. What are we gonna do about it, right? Well, that's great, we've identified that, but how do we design a program that reaches them, right? Well, it's not gonna be me. I don't have the lived experience personally. I can speak as a director of the program, and we've put together plenty of committees and plenty of groups, but were we putting together the right organizations, the right folks to be able to be in place, the right people to come to the table, and what would it take? What are the barriers that are preventing them to come from the table? Some of the organizations that as a department we were asking to come and attend were the same organizations. Please come as a stakeholder, please come and do this. One, these organizations, they don't have the funds, they don't have the ability to send staff, they don't have the support that other organizations may have had to build the current institutions that are in place right now that serve certain populations. And so we needed to have a very focused, we needed to have individuals and with professional and lived experience that could help us take a program like this, explore it, and tell us what it is. For me, in my role, it's to get out of the way and to be able to show where the doors are. When I look at this in our goals for identifying and addressing institutional and systemic barriers, well, those institutional aspects of the way we do business in government are found in something called administrative rules, right? So you have a statute, you have a bill passed, it's made into a law, then it becomes provided who the agency is that could be running the program. Then it's up to that agency to decide how they're going to design that program and put it together to get it out into the community. And so when you're looking at something like that, it really leaves a lot of variance on what that can do, depending on who's in the department and who you have in a seat of decision making within that department. The reality is, and sometimes a department will be able to address that, but in the years past, no, many departments don't have that ability to do that. And so for us, the need to be able to put together a diverse group with the interest and the lived experience, and to tell us what they need versus us going, well, this is how you put together an energy program, or this is how it's supposed to be. We go, well, this is how we're doing it now, and it's sort of worked. We got a lot of money out, and a lot of people were served, but are we serving the right population? Or is it getting to the population of greatest need? Is it equitable? So as we begin to examine that and bringing these people together, they're able to tell that story to us, right? And be able to direct us to, this is what you need to do. And then our role at the department is to go, okay, this is a great idea. How do we enact it? And then I can take the group to those doors of how do we change the rules? How do we get the advisory bodies that can make the decision for the department to make those changes? And I can take this group and our own recommendations straight into where you need to step, right? A lot of organizations, a lot of groups like that, it's like, great, you get the advisor, but they don't know where to go in government to change the institutional piece of this, right? And this is where we're at with this. So I know where the institutional language needs to be changed and added once we have it. So that's why that was my need. And this gives me, as a director of a program like this, the support, the lived experience, that I can't, and all I can do, but what I can do is get out of the way and show where the door is and be able to help that group, that coalition, and that idea live and expand itself within the confines of the bureaucracy to make that happen so that we get the outcome that needs to be, other than just having it be in a statewide housing plan. And it sounds really good, doesn't it? I'll just be frank. All right, how do you measure that? So we ask the same thing, right? How do we measure that? And so with I call it our little program, this program right here is being watched and monitored by our leadership in regards to how we go about doing this, and is some of the practices and some of the things that we're doing, is it replicable, sustainable? Is it best practice? What did we do to make that happen? How's that?
Perfect, Dan. Before you go, maybe Nicole, Dan is the director of the program, and Nicole and her team implemented. Can you talk a little bit, Nicole, why you all thought that a coalition was the best strategy to achieve those objectives?
Yeah. So our organization is really rooted in strategic thinking and goal setting, and creating goals, objectives, strategies, tactics, then turning around and implementing those. And it's this very smooth, scientific, expert-driven kind of practice. And the energy industry is really rooted in that sort of clean, scientific implementation space. And that's the mindset that we approach pretty much any challenge that we or client problem. I guess problem is like the problem statement that comes our way. And we were observing the data points that Dan was just talking about, energy burden, and the customers being served, the customers not being served. And we realized we needed a diversity, equity, inclusion strategic plan for how we were going to be more intentional, or very intentional, about weaving those concepts into our implementation. And so we sharpened our pencils and started to draft up some objectives that seemed right to us in our small 7 to 10 person team. And we got about 2 steps along the way and stopped ourselves and realized that this is not an area where our team are the experts. And it would be quite overconfident of us to behave as though we are and assume that we are, and to move forward in that way, making decisions on behalf of people who know better than us, who have those lived experiences, and whose input would be incredibly valuable. And so we stopped our process cold, turned to OHCS and said, here's actually what we propose before we go any further with this planning process. We need a group of people who are going to, advise on this. So it started off as I think we've had at least 3 different names for this group, if not 4, before we finally launched and titled this the DEI Coalition. But we were looking first at like a steering committee, and then realized, wait, no, that is too flimsy of a concept. It's not, it doesn't demonstrate our investment in really hearing the voices of these people and working in a collaborative way with them. So then I think we turned it into a committee, and that still didn't seem sturdy enough to us. So we named it a DEI coalition because we built in this consultative, collaborative relationship. It's really, really critical to our program team that this group is not just this tack on. They're not folks who are giving us ideas that we can choose to take 10% of them, if any at all, and then move on and, again, check a box and say, well, we asked the community, we engaged them. Instead, we really wanted to find experts within the Oregon housing market in various different kind of areas of focus. So we have people who are energy experts within affordable housing, but we also have people on the coalition who specialize in affordable housing finance and property management, who work with residents and customer relations to really truly understand the lived journey of the folks who are living in affordable multifamily properties. And there's going to be a plug in a minute for, we're still recruiting. We're actually looking for affordable housing residents. Well, actually, I'll do my plug now. There were 3 positions that we, in our communication channels, the way that we advertised for this, we didn't connect with anyone who fit the description of affordable housing resident, a member of Oregon tribes, or someone who is a rural Oregon resident. And it's really important to us that we find people who can be a part of this group and bring those perspectives. So we're still not done looking, and we're actively recruiting. So here's the first plug. If you know anyone, or if you yourself fit any of those descriptions and would be interested in joining us, please reach out and let us know. But we really looked for this well-rounded group of folks who have some insights into each aspect of that affordable housing journey. And we know that even our brain trust that we've assembled with this DEI coalition is imperfect and incomplete, but it is far more than we had before. And we are working hand in hand with this group to implement the ideas that they have, to ask them to ask us the hard questions, and to reflect a mirror back at the implementation team and the program design and show us where the gaps are. And these are paid positions. I'll also say that because we believe in truly compensating folks at a consultative pay scale. We're way above minimum wage because so often steering committees are a volunteer thing. People give their time, their energy, they have to find childcare, they have to feed their families, take time off of work, and then there's no or very little compensation. And so we really wanted to make this as much of a partnership as humanly possible. That's how we're really viewing this relationship. And so that's how the DEI Coalition was born.
Thank you, Nicole and Dan. Does anyone have any questions about the what or the how? We've talked about what this is and how we started, and we'll now talk about, the why. We'll talk about the how, but any questions before we get into the how?
So I apologize if this is like a naive question, but the phrase energy burden has come up a couple times, and you know, the definition of like house or cost burden is an individual or family spending more than 30% of their income on housing. Does energy burden also have a technical definition? And if so, what is that?
Yeah,
What is
that's
it?
a great question. I'll qualify that. So if you're paying more than 6% of your income towards energy, you're energy burdened. If you're paying more than 10%, you're extremely energy burdened. The average non-white in the state of Oregon pays around 16%. And the highest category of that pays around 35%. So that's sizable, right? I just said 35%, right? And what's the housing? It's 30%, which is the typical. So that gives you an idea of when you're looking at just paying rent, that's just one part of the story of, you know, you still have, you've got water, you have, you know, sewer, you've got garbage, you've got all these other aspects that have to be included in that whole thing. Again, energy burden is just one spoke in the poverty wheel that we're trying to answer and collaborate on. So that's the definition for that.
We want to talk a little bit, I think we'll stay on this slide, a little bit about how this coalition came together. Nicole started to talk about that a bit with her talk, but Nicole, do you want to talk just a little bit about the logistics of the process that you all went through to form the coalition? And then, Sabbath, if you can follow her with the facilitation aspect of the coalition.
Yeah, so this was a very detailed labor of love. I will just say that. That we put a lot of work into this and hopefully made it look like ballet on the other side. Hopefully made that look like an easy thing to the outside world. But our greatest intentions as we were thinking through how we would recruit to the coalition, how we would set up the structure, or at least the preliminary structure for the DEI coalition, was really trying to minimize implicit bias in the selection process as much as possible and make it accessible. A lot of what we have learned over, I don't know, the past few years, especially, I think I've just had this like exponential rate of growth in understanding the inequities in like recruitment and hiring processes, for example, but also in outreach for programs like this. Is that the methods that we use to recruit people are not equitable. You know, for example, you might have a requirement to like write a really long essay or provide a ton of documentation to prove, you know, certain credentials. And that in and of itself is just the application process. There's no guarantee that it's going to move forward into anything for the applicant. It's incredibly labor intensive, and you know, just in general, for like all people are very, very busy. We all have our lives going on. We all have full-time jobs, and or if we don't have full-time jobs, we're patching together an income and childcare. No one has spare time to really be pouring into an application. And we also wanted to keep an open mind that you know, the majority of Americans read at a 3rd to 5th grade reading level. Like we in our energy industry are used to, you know, folks that have advanced degrees, and we have a bad habit in energy of writing at way too high of a level, using acronyms and really big words that are really not necessary to communicate. And so we wanted to be really intentional about making the application process, you know, like write it in plain language, make it very, very simple and straightforward, not have anything hidden about it. So, so first we created a document that was a call for applications. It's available on our website, which we have a link to that coming up as well. But that document is probably the most robust thing that we made and put out into the world, but it outlined our purpose, kind of the background of the program, the purpose for the coalition, how, the idea came to be, and then really explaining what the role and responsibility would be for a person who was going to join the coalition. And similarly, described the compensation. And, one of the other considerations that we made was that we might be adding folks to the coalition who don't have access to broadband internet or a web video capable device, especially because we were starting this up during it was toward the end of 2021, we were putting this together. So we were all still very virtual. Apparently we still are. I'm stuck in this space today. And so we wanted to make sure that since we weren't going to be hosting meetings in person, that we would make that accessible to folks. So we included an option of, if you need any of these technological support pieces, like we will just provide that for you. We will pay for your internet. We will get you a tablet, and we will compensate you. So we described all of that in the call for applications. We included a link to the application form, which was online, but we also made a hard copy available for anyone who needed that. And the application was in English. That was one of the things that we really wanted to be able to make that available in different languages. But then I think one of the barriers that we saw was at the start of this, at least, is we are conducting our coalition meetings in English. And so that's just where we're at right now. We really would like to move that into a multilingual space with translation possibilities in the future. But to launch it, we started in English. So we were like, okay, the application needs to be in English. And that one is going to be a barrier for now, but we hope to move forward and change that. And then our application, you can see all the questions on one page online. We didn't do the thing where you have to answer one question to get to the next, and then you're spending 2 hours running around trying to find the answers. So someone can click in and see everything that they need to respond to and make the choice if that fits for them or not. And we limited the number of written responses so that would not, so if there was someone who was trying to write a 300-word response and someone else who had 2 sentences, that we didn't end up with that kind of imbalance of responses. We made everything a very short form response so that we had as much apples to apples comparison as possible. We created a scoring rubric, thinking through the lens of what does 1 point look like, what does 2 points look like, created some examples so that our team had something to compare and contrast against as we were ranking candidates. And the interesting thing about this as a pilot was kind of an experiment, was we decided to interview everyone who applied in the first round. We had 17 applicants and we were like, they're all really solid humans. Let's interview everyone and get that kind of interactive understanding of each other, because knowing that someone is going to show up different on paper than in conversation. And we didn't want someone who maybe isn't an eloquent writer, but who would be a great contributor in the coalition. We didn't want to lose them just because of that bias. And so, so then we interviewed everyone. We tried to make those conversations as informal as possible. We did have a set of questions that we interviewed everyone with. They were the same questions for every candidate, and we provided them to the candidates in advance, except for when email was our enemy. Sometimes things got eaten by spam, but we rolled with it. But we did our best to, be as forthcoming with the process as possible at the outset, so that people knew what they were showing up for. And we were really, really trying to quell like nerves or anxiety and help people bring their best self to that interview process. I'll hand it to Sapita.
I guess it's on. Can you hear me? So one of the things that the OR-MEP program had as one of their principles was to make sure that the facilitators of the DEI coalition are neutral bodies, right? So they're not tied to the program, and by no means influence the direction of how the DEI coalition makes decisions. So that's how we got hired. And while we were part of, I guess, on the periphery of what all the steps that Nicole was describing, we were purposefully staying out of it so that we are not influencing the decision on who comes on board and how the interactions are. So with that, we got into our very first session with the coalition without having a good background of who is coming in, right? So Quinn and I set one-on-one interviews with every individual coalition member before our first session as a group to get to know each other and kind of sense how the dynamic of the larger team of the 10 people might be. And then, as she mentioned, this was all virtual. So we had to figure out how we are going to facilitate all these conversations virtually. And that was one of the reasons that we decided to have to join as co-facilitators. It's kind of harder to facilitate sessions online when you're alone and you're kind of figuring out technical challenges, as well as to make sure that you watch everyone's body language and eye contacts, and making sure that you listen carefully, right? So that's one of the reasons that we decided to co-facilitate the sessions. And at the same time, we both have different perspectives. So sometimes during the sessions, some of the coalition members may say something and we may not hear it the way that they said what they said, and the other person repeating it, we check each other out. It's like, did you really, I just want to make sure that I heard this correctly, right? So it's always nice to have that second ear to make sure that we're really hearing what the coalition members are saying and are sharing with us. Another thing that I thought was really interesting in this process, and I appreciate the OR-MEP team for their decision, is that in addition to bringing external facilitators, they've decided that they are going to stay out of most of these sessions unless they are contributing, like they're bringing some information about the program, they're sharing information of the why, of what the program is, what the history is. But other than that, when the conversations happen, the discussions happen, they are not in the room so that the coalition members can speak freely. And if there are things that they see as issues, that they can be less, they can be more open sharing those. So a few things about how we are running the coalition meetings.
Does anyone have any questions?
I want to thank you for your efforts here. It's very good, and the process is excellent. My question is, and I have to leave to go facilitate a meeting, so I'm sorry, this might be jumping the gun, but what is it that you want the coalition team to produce?
Yeah, so I think it's our next question, right? That's great. Nicole, do you want to start first and for me to join after, or do you want me to start?
Why don't you go ahead and start, and I'll backfill you.
Yeah, so the coalition came together sometimes in April, and there was a very immediate ask that the program team had, which meant that we had to jump into session, right? And the first thing was, as I don't know if you attended the previous session that Mecca and I guess team members were presenting, but currently there is a long wait list of applicants who have applied for funding from the program. And while this wait list was growing, the team realized that perhaps the selection criteria for who gets the funding is not as equitable as we want it to be. So the very first thing, which was more of a short-term focus, was to get the coalition to help decide on how to prioritize these waitlist applicants based on more of an equity perspective, right? So that was one of the first things they did. But in the long run, as as Nicole mentioned, the goal of the coalition is actually looking at the program holistically and come up with this, more of a strategic intent and plan on how to make the overall program more equitable. So that's the overall work of the coalition. Does that answer your question?
Yes, so they wrote the metrics for determining what the equitability is. Is that what you wanted them to do, or you're having them do?
That was one of the elements that they're going to do, and that they have done, and they've advised us on. The way the program is currently set up has a prioritization that's in place and a threshold that puts the folks that are at the front of the line for folks that have applied or are applying for our existing funding sources that the department has. And that creates some dynamics inherent that seem to proportionately provide on a first, it sets up as a first come, first serve based on that threshold. And what you find is the projects that are in communities that have really good developers, right? And they know how to do our applications in our NOFA process, as this is one of those subsidies. They tend to get up to the top, and they tend to get up to the front. Now, are those the best, most intended projects for equity and inclusion, or do they match with what it is that we're trying to manifest in serving those energy burden populations? Because that's the criteria that we're looking at, as well as other criteria. So we're re-examining that. And we're looking and going, no, I don't think that quite hits the mark, right? So what metrics do we need to include to make sure that that scope, that is changed? You might we'll meet with the one threshold, but what other metrics do we need to include that weigh a project and move that up the list to put them up into a category where we can be more intentional about the population we're serving and why we're serving that population. At the same time, getting the energy efficiency, health, comfort, durability for that population. It helps target that piece. And so with their input with from the coalition, they're providing those metrics are the objectives, and then we begin to put it into a tool, a mechanism, right? And then we go back and forth and go, does this tool make sense? Does this look right? Does that, like you said, does that lens and how we do it and how we put that together, does that create the fruit and the outcome that we can manage that gets those populations served that we're trying to serve? And is there anything in our rules and our manuals, even in statute, that we need to modify that gives us the ability and flexibility to do that? And to add to the fact that I'm the director of the program, didn't go to any of the meetings, right? Not involved in that. One of the things that we found with, at least I've observed in my experience, that just who I am as a public servant and who I am, I can come into these groups that are diverse communities, and it changes the environment of the room. You know what I'm saying? Just no matter how well intentioned or where that, it will change. You can't have the conversations. The other dynamics that we did with the coalition and the way that in the manner that we set it up, it also exempted us from public record. We don't have to take record of that. So because it's a contracted, it's through something, the way that it's set up, it works this way. That gives this group the ability to speak freely, and we get genuine information and feedback in that way. As much as I'd love to be in the room with these wonderful, fantastic people, and eventually I will, and tomorrow, right, guys? This is the practice that we're looking at doing and seeing how that brings to the table, because so many times, we, as a state department, you bring in somebody, you hire somebody to come in, and or somebody like me will go, I've been doing this for 20 years. I know how to do a program, like Nicole was saying. We're engineers, technicians. We know how to put programs together, but we're not. We're missing, right? And so the dynamics so far have brought us some metrics, some ideas to put together and to take back to the coalition and to discuss, and we begin to work through that. Does that make sense? Yes.
Is this a short-term or long-term support
Forever,
system?
as long as I'm with it. No. Yes, when you say long-term, that's that institutional thing. So the craft here of my my part here is to, once we get this developed, it's not just going to go into some memo and a manual that's as good as the next governor is in place. We're going to take it and develop it and put it into our institution, into our rules, into our administrative rules that are the legal binding directions of how we will deliver the program by statute. Once you have those rules in place, that's like removing an Alabama tick once it's in there, right? That's you got old institutional stuff that's in there. When we talk about institutional change, and you're looking at government from a state bureaucrat, it's right there. It's all right in there. It's either it's not there and it needs to be there, or we got to change it, modify it, or get rid of it and eliminate it. And that changes a whole lot of things, because there's quite a bit of power and decision making that comes to the executive branch after a statute is put in place to decide and interpret what that means, right? So for our purposes, I'm proud to say that we already have a very strong supportive attorney with the Department of Justice to help us do this, already been put in place, and we're ready to go. And so this is that point that we want to encourage our coalition and this coalition to know that there's power here, and that we're moving this forward in that way. So the permanency of this, yeah, as soon as, like I said, Alabama tick, it's once it gets in there, it's very difficult to change it unless somebody like me, predecessor, what have you, actively goes in and changes it.
Well, I can just say thank you, and your attention to detail and the scope and the solidarity in your process here is just beyond. I hope this becomes like a college template for people to learn how to do this and set it up this way, so we can replicate this kind of thing. Thank you so much.
Thanks for your question. And Nicole, do you want to add anything to what Dan and I added?
I actually think you covered it really well, and I want to make sure that we keep moving on and have space for more questions. So,
Any additional questions? I think, Ellen or Kwame, if you all have, these are two of our coalition members, and they went through this process. So we would love if you all have any thoughts you want to share on your experience with the process, and perhaps that, like Sabata mentioned, that first sprint we had of getting those criteria ready. Would either one of you like to speak to that? Yeah.
Hello, everybody. I am Ellen, and when I first got recruited for this coalition, I was the executive director for the Philippine American Chamber of Commerce. I will have news for you later or tomorrow, but I'm still useful to the coalition. This is more of a testimonial of how detailed we really go for whenever we have meetings. And we, in the past months, have been meeting like twice bi-weekly, right? And we really go and drill into the details, because sometimes the criteria, for example, that are listed can be understood in so many different ways. And so we wanted to make sure that when it is being rated, it's fair. And just like what Dan or everybody was saying earlier, they really wanted this to be, or I think it was Nicole, sorry, Nicole, it was you, by us, for us, with us, right? Because sometimes we have a blind side. If you are not a member of that community, there are things that you don't see. And so this coalition is really drilling down deep into that to make sure that there's equity. And yes, ma'am, they are kind of ahead, because Paco was invited to, I will not name the county, but it was an RFP for multi-family housing. And they did not know actually how to get into the DEI side of it. They were actually very general and telling the contractors, well, you have to have a DEI component in your RFP or proposals. And the contractors were kind of, what do you mean? They could not really detail it. So you are ahead, and thank you. I don't know how you're going to share it with all the counties in Oregon, but this is ahead of everybody else. right, you can agree, you can agree to that. So yeah, this coalition is really working. Thank you for putting us together, and we are hoping that is this the first group, the first set of members would be able to draft this in such a way that the next group would, that the only progress really is to get deeper and deeper so that racial equity and racial justice would be prevailing. Thank you. Kwame. By the way, this is the first time that Kwame and I are meeting in person since April.
By the way, thank you so much for the kind words. I believe again, when we went through this process with Dan, I remember I first met Dan and met everybody. Like I said from the beginning, as a person of color, there's some words that we see, we hear, but we can reach them. So this is a system try to level the playing field, try to make sure that not only going forward, but other organizations will model this and using for, like you said it. I can say what best as you said it, but we're deeply involved in this. We deeply want to make it work, and we will make it work with all your effort. And that's all I can say. Thank you.
I'm also going to say that these individuals are really good at challenging a lot of things. You know, like maybe this is not the best example, but when when my kids were young, you know how, and you probably have had the same experience, the questions of why. Like you could go through like a day of why, but why, right? And so it's been really nice to see that they challenge a lot of the policies. Why don't you? Like, why isn't this covering, you know, the gas utilities? Why can't we get funding for it? Why can't we do this? Why can't we change the policy? You know, so it's actually really interesting to see that, and it's very much appreciated.
I think one thing that we didn't cover pretty small in as much detail is that
The people on the
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you all hear me okay? So this group came from different areas in the service territory. They have different backgrounds and lived experience. So when they get on a phone call together, over the last couple of months, they are getting comfortable enough with each other to challenge each other, which is exactly what we wanted. They're starting to build a relationship where one of them may suggest that this is where we should prioritize, and the other one will say, we don't agree. And we sit and we think through, well, why do we not want to agree on this? And an example that I can share with you all is, you know, we have people of different racial backgrounds, different ethnic backgrounds, and there was some discussion around should we prioritize BIPOC versus rural? You know, which one of these demographics should we put to the top of our list when we think about criteria? And it was a fascinating conversation this group of 10 folks had. And ultimately, they decided that both of these groups are incredibly important, but what's most important are BIPOC folks in rural communities, that demographic is incredibly vulnerable. So how do we elevate and amplify that group of people? So that came through in the criteria that ultimately end up as recommendations to program team to prioritize the wait list. So it wasn't just one person or another, it was their collective conversation that helped them get to a point to provide these criteria to the program team. Any additional thoughts or questions from the group? So we have on the screen here, as Nicole mentioned, we are still recruiting. So if anyone in the room is interested in joining the coalition, we would welcome your application. If you know of anyone that might be interested in joining the coalition and fits any of the criteria on the screen, please feel free to forward. And even if you don't feel like you fit any of the criteria on the screen, please, we still would like to see your interest, because the coalition members will at some point transition off, and that at some point these folks may find themselves in a situation where they no longer can participate, and we would love to have folks that, you know, can backfill some of those positions.
Quinn.
Yes.
Hey, Nicole, could you repeat the spots? We had Native American, we had a resident, And what was the other one?
Affordable housing
rural?
resident.
A housing resident, rural, and Native American is what we were
Correct.
looking for that piece.
And
Go
any
ahead.
combination therein as well. So, you know, that could be embodied in one person.
Absolutely,
theory.
absolutely could. And to add to that, Native American, you asked me about energy burden. The average for that population for energy burden in the state of Oregon is 30%.
So are there any other questions, or more than that, any feedback? If you heard something that you kind of think maybe we should do things differently, or maybe you have some other thoughts, we would love to hear that too. Go ahead.
So is this for just Portland area? So yeah, I work in Benton County, Corvallis for Benton County Health Department, housing coordinator, and so we assist the housing population with income with $1,000 security deposit, and we pay up to 801 on their rent, and we ask that they pay 30% of their income, and they have to apply for Section 8, and we'll do that until their name comes up on Section 8. And so I don't know, is it something that I can do to bring to the Corvallis area? Yeah, that's my question.
Yes. Let's talk. You're in Benton County. I know where you're at. I know who you are. Let's talk. I can get you in fact, you're in one of my favorite counties only because that's where I met my wife and went to school and raised kids, and I had both my kids in Corvallis. So yeah, we're family. I'll just put that. So let's talk. Yes.
Any other questions before we wrap up for the afternoon?
I'm just curious if if this coalition or the MEP program, with the pending governor change in the state, which admittedly I'm not following as close as I should, but are there any candidates that stick out either in opposition or in favor of the MEP program and everything you guys and gals are doing?
Well, we generally don't have those conversations with candidates, so I can't answer to that. I can't answer that. The governor that I currently work for supports the OR-MEP program through various executive orders over the year, specifically Executive Order 1720. Whatever governor is in place, whatever priorities they have, our federal and current priorities will still be in play. And I have a lot of fast work to do. We all do, to get it into rules, right? And I'm going to overplay the Alabama tick thing again. So it's just the sooner we can get those types of things manifested, the better. But it's not going to derail anything. It's a matter of how much resources and prioritization that we will get as a program to support and continue with these types of elements. But it's going to be hard pressed not to, because we have mechanisms in place, and because this program in and of itself, because of the type of funding it has, because of the way that we're setting it up and manifesting itself, can be a bit of an island and continue to move forward up the beach, regardless of where the tide is. So with that confidence, as we begin to look into the future, yeah, it's always interesting to see how the chairs will change, but the priorities for this program will be the same, and the manner in which we have the mechanism. We already have the budget approved for the next biennium, which goes past the governor, what the governor's whatever governor would be. So we believe every candidate has has housing as number one issue for them to deal with. I think we heard that at session, and we concur with that. We have a $750 million budget going in. I've been with the department for over 20 years. That is the mind-blowingly, I mean, that was the budget for the entire department over a 4-year period when I started back. I mean, it's immense what the ask is, but that's what the need is, right? And so with that kind of prioritization, this is part of that, right? So how we go about doing that with intentionality, that's not going to change, regardless of who's on the hill there. So is that helpful?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess we are giving you a few minutes back at the end of the day. Thank you all for staying with us, and thanks for all the good questions. If you have any other questions or any thoughts, please reach out to us. And also another plug for the 3 DEI coalition members we're looking for. So if you know someone, please do tell them to apply. We want to enrich the coalition. Thank you.